Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's book-to-show comparison for the Expanse Season 2, Episode 11, Here There Be Dragons. This video is a part of a series of videos where I compare the Expanse TV shows to the novels on which it is based, pointing out the differences and giving my opinion on how well I think the adaptations work. I am by no means an expert on the novels, just some guy who read them recently and thought it would be fun to compare the two. I'll have to give a spoiler warning for The Expanse up to the end of Season 3. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video. But if you haven't read the novels, it's all good. I won't give away any spoilers for future events that have yet to occur in the show. So our episodes begin with a flashback to when Dr. Strickland first took May right before the Ganymede incident. We see Strickland talking to a female scientist about how they need to speed up the test because of Eros, but she thinks they're moving too fast, but May keeps interrupting, saying that she wants to see her dad. So Strickland distracts her by playing an I Spy game about what plants he sees. She then asks where they're going, and he simply mentions it's a surprise. Now, we did get a scene like this in the novels, however, it was the prologue of Book 2, so we met May and Strickland before we met Prax or any of the other characters. So it's a different dynamic to see the flashbacks later in the story. Also, the scene is just the first of several that are sprinkled throughout the episode, rather than being lumped together in one chapter. I already talked about in the previous videos the difference on how in the show May was meant to be with Dr. Strickland, but in the novels Dr. Strickland took her out of daycare where the female scientist he was with posed as her mother, and she was being a lot more creepy with May in the novels. Overall, I like how the show handled this. I think I actually prefer getting these scenes later in the story after we already know the story of Prax and how his daughter is missing. First off, it means that when we first meet Prax, we the audience are just as uncertain about what happened to May as he is. Secondly, the revelation here has more impact because we're already invested in what happened to May. So I'm going to give this a +3. So we then flash forward to the present times at the same location where Holden, Amos, Naomi, and Prax go through the same door we just saw Strickland take May through, as they are following where they saw her go in the footage. They enter an old section of the station where Prax says no one lives, but states that people could live there. As Holden and Amos go forward, Amos ruminates on how Holden didn't hold Amos back from beating up Roma, aka Chicken Boy, and Holden tries to brush it off by saying he learned that he can't stop Amos, but he doesn't buy it, and says that if he hadn't beat up Chicken Boy, that Holden probably would have beat him up instead. Holden then says it's important to stop the protomolecule. Beating up an asshole trying to extort them, who's in the way, is a very small price to pay, and if that's what he needs to do, then he'll do it. Meanwhile, Naomi tries to prepare Prax for the possibility that his daughter is dead and tries to persuade him not to go with them. When Prax tells her that she doesn't know what it's like to lose a child, Naomi retorts that she does, that she lost her son and had to give up after years of searching for him. But Prax retorts by asking her if someone told her what she's telling him now, would she have stopped? And then states that now's not the time for him to stop looking. So in the novels, Naomi stayed behind on the Stenabulus while Holden, Amos, and Prax went looking for May. It was Holden who questioned that Prax come with them in the first place, but Amos simply gave him a gun and stated plainly that Prax needed to find his kid. And as I touched on in earlier videos, Holden was at this stage unaware that the protomolecule was even involved and was just hardened by his past experiences. And Amos never questioned why Holden was being a hard-ass. The revelation that Naomi has a son that she lost comes much sooner in the show than it did in the novels. This isn't revealed until book 5 in the novels. In fact, I think it's safe to say that when writing book 2, the writers hadn't come up with this storyline about her having a son yet. But this is one of the advantages of the show, that is, since at this stage the books are much further ahead, they can take this foreknowledge from future books and start sprinkling them in earlier in the story to further establish it. Plus, it makes sense that Naomi could relate to Prax on this level as having lost a child herself, so it makes more sense to bring it up now, so I'm going to give this a +2. So we then go over to the Martian compound on Earth, where Captain Martins dresses down Bobby Draper for her behavior during the meeting and tells her that she'll be returning to Mars as soon as possible. He tells her a story that he heard from her father about how she had saved his life during a hiking trip that went wrong, and asks her what happened to that girl. And she replies by saying that her team got killed by a thing that wasn't wearing a vac suit. She then berates him for lying to her about what happened on Ganymede, and then Martins drills her and her whole generation for being soft, as he had to live under constant threat from being attacked by Earth, and says that she's acting spoiled by wanting peace of mind. He then tells her that she's not a soldier anymore and thus is going home in dishonor, and then dismisses her. So in the novels, as I stated, Thorson was her handler, not Martins, and they do have a conversation after her outburst at the peace conference, but it went down quite differently. Thorson actually tells Bobby to stay on Earth with him so that she can redeem herself, but Bobby then asks why she's there and states if it's to be a showpiece, then she doesn't want to stay, but Thorson angrily tells her that she's there because those are her orders and that she'll do as she's told. Now, as I covered in the previous video, in the novels, Draper didn't give testimony. She was just there, and Avasarala told her that she was a showpiece to show off to Earth simply by her being there, and Draper apparently is not happy with this arrangement. And also, Martin's comments about having how the new generation is soft now, he had to grow up under constant threat of Earth. It was actually not the case. In the novels. In the novels, Earth and Mars have actually were allies up until very recently, so arguably it's the newer generation that has had a harder time, but it seems like the show is trying to draw parallels to modern times, where people who grew up in the 60s will say they were lived under constant threat of nuclear attack under the Cold War and whatnot, so it seems like they're trying to draw a direct comparison to modern times there. Which I think is fine. But I think the show's version is an improvement, as Draper is more involved and proactive, and there's more suspense involved, so I'm going to give this a +2. So we then go over to Venus, where the Abergast tries to send probes down to the Eros crash site, but every time they try, their probes are destroyed before they get there, and they only have 2 probes left, where the Martian warship still looms over them. Dr. Uturbi tries to convince Captain Janus to take the ship down to the crash site, and Janus replies by saying that in ancient times what maps would say if there was an unexplored territory where the map ran out is "Here There Be Dragons," and thus we get the episode title. But more than that, it's a metaphor for the unknown and how dangerous and ominous it is. Now, as I surely mentioned before, in the novels we didn't get any point of view on the Abergast. We simply heard Dr. Michael John de Uturbe inform Avasarala of what happened to the Abergast after it was destroyed, but it is interesting seeing the events that led to the Abergast going down toward the crash site in the first place. It does help fill in the blanks, so I'm going to give this a +1. So we then go back to Earth, to Avasarala's office, where Aaron Wright comes in to tell her that he knows how to get to Mal through his family, as the financial pressure that they've been putting on them has gotten to them, and he thinks that they can get his daughter Clarissa Mal to cooperate. But Avasarala changes the subject by telling him that she got a tip that the Eros incident hearings are going to make Aaron Wright the star of the show. So Aaron Wright realizes that without Mal there, he is going to take the blunt of the blame. He asks her what she's told him, and she says that she hadn't told him anything, and then suggests that he take the opportunity to tell them everything to confess his sins. He tries to give a brave smile and says that he'll get through it, while Avasarala seems sympathetic to him. Now, nothing like this in the novels happened. As I mentioned before, Aaron Wright wasn't even involved in the Eros incident, and at this stage in the story, Avasarala isn't even aware of Aaron Wright's connection to Jules Pierre Mao. And we never got a scene in the books where Aaron Wright is considering coming clean. But it is interesting that they name-dropped Clarissa Mao, who will appear in the third season and the third book. That's something that the novels never did, because I suspect when writing the second novel they hadn't come up with that character yet. So another example of how the show has the advantage of being able to foreshadow future events. I mean, this scene is somewhat interesting as it works for the storyline that the show set up, but I think it improves upon. But I don't think it improves upon what the books did, so I'll just give this a 0. We then see Bobby Draper daydreaming about being on the beach when Martins comes in and informs her that it's time to catch the shuttle back to Mars. But just as the craft makes its descent, it suddenly changes directions and goes back up. Martins then is informed that all air traffic has been suspended due to a possible OPA terrorist threat, and that the order was issued by Undersecretary Avasarala. So Bobby returns to her compound. So it's heavily implied that Avasarala made up this threat in order to keep Bobby on Earth because she wanted to work with her. Now, nothing like this happened in the novels. As I said, they didn't even want Bobby to leave. They wanted her to stay, so Avasarala never had to make up a threat. But I think it works for this story being told, so I'll give this a +1. So we go to the Rocinante, where Alex is trying to figure out how to get Holden and the others off of Ganymede, but is unable to transmit or to fire up the engines because he'd be detected by the MCRN and the UN ships that are currently standing off and blockading the moon. He then receives a transmission from an MCRN ship that they are landing at a site in Ganymede and not to be interfered with, so it seems like they are a special black ops ship. So Alex assumes it has something to do with the protomolecule, so he wants to follow them with the hopes that that's where Holden will be, but he has no way to get there. Until he comes up with an idea to float the Rocinante there using the natural gravity of Jupiter's moons. So in the novels, as I said, Alex is never shown on the Rocinante by himself, but also the situation is very different. Rather than it being a standoff blockade, it's a hot war, where the UN and MCRN ships are engaged in battle tactics, which makes it easier for Alex to slip by them unnoticed, as there's a lot of movement around and they're more interested in fighting each other. Further, since Alex isn't aware of the protomolecule, he never gets the idea to follow an MCRN ship going to a secret landing site, which of course also doesn't happen in the novels, as the Martians never take control of the hybrid project like they do here in the show, and instead are still involved in a bidding war with the UN of the hybrid technology, a bidding war that the UN will eventually win. And in fact, in the novels, Alex only knows where to go because Naomi contacts him and tells him where to go. But I think both scenes work for their respective mediums, so I'll give this a 0. So then we get another flashback scene with May, where we first hear Dr. Strickland talking to the female scientist who is concerned about their demonstration and it's going to cause a full-on war, but Strickland doesn't seem concerned. May then complains that she wants to go home, but Dr. Strickland calms her by telling her a story of a moth and a butterfly and how it needs to struggle to thrive, and then tells her that there's nothing to be afraid of. Now, in the novel, Strickland took May before the fighting on Ganymede broke out, so we didn't get any of this exposition, and we didn't get a moth story, and that frankly seems out of place. Instead, May has a drawing of a space monster, so the scientist posing as her mother told her she was going to show her something really cool, and then took her to see the protomolecule hybrid, which of course just freaked her out, and she screamed in terror. I do like how they gave further indication that the protomolecule hybrid attack, which started the fighting between Earth and Mars, was in fact a run-through, a demonstration that some involved with were freaked out, and it went on a lot too far. I think that adds a lot of texture to the story. Plus, it makes sense that May would be a lot more freaked out and not want to go forward, so I'm going to give this a +2. We then flash forward to the same location in present times where Holden, Amos, Naomi, and Prax continue their search for May. Prax explains that the Cascade has systems continue to fail, and then Prax finds the empty vial that we just saw Strickland give May's medicine to her with in the flashback, which tells Prax that Strickland is in fact keeping May alive. They then come across a pair of people who are ripping wire from the station in order to sell it in order to book passage off of Ganymede, so Holden simply lets them go. Now, the novel's version of Holden's journey through the old tunnels is much different and much more extensive. As I said, Naomi wasn't there. She was just guiding them from the ship, and Prax never found May's medicine. Further, instead of coming across two desperate people looking for escape, they come across a group of Martian mercenaries that work for a mercenary group called Pinkwater. Prax goes to shoot them, but Amos stops him, saying that these aren't the kind of people they shoot, they're the kind of people they talk to. So Holden reveals who he is, the famous James Holden from the OPA, and offers to hire them on a mission to help find Prax's daughter. He also promises them safe passage off of Ganymede, so they agree. The Pinkwater mercenaries are led by a man named Wendell, and there are several of them, 6 of them if I'm remembering correctly, and they actually go with Holden and the others for the remainder of the sequences, which was much longer in the books than it is here in the show. I can kind of get why the show skipped over the Pinkwater mercenaries, although I did like it in the novels. It's not entirely necessary to the main story, and I understand the show's desire to truncate events, and introducing new characters just for a short amount of time wouldn't really work as well in the television medium. Plus, I think it adds a nice touch having Prax find the empty medicine vial, so he knows that May is still alive. So I'm going to give this a +1. Then we go back to the Martian compound on Earth where Bobby Draper asks to see Captain Martins. She then tells him that him and his father must not have been close because the story that he told her about how she saved her father's life was a lie that her father told, when in fact it was he who saved her life. She then demands to know what really happened on Ganymede, and when he tries to dismiss her, she attacks him. She continues to beat him until he tells her what happened to her team, so he eventually gives in and gives her his hand terminal, which has the information on a secret project called the Caliban Project. They play a clip that shows a sales demo for a new weapon where it shows the hybrid killing her team, an attempt to sell this weapon. Bobby asks him if he got a good deal on the weapon, and Martin simply answers by saying it was for the good of Mars. So Bobby knocks him out and then calls in the guard and then knocks him out and then leaves the room. So in the novels, as I said, Captain Martins there was actually looking out for Bobby's interests. He did mention that he knew her father in passing, but he never told her an inspirational story that turned out to be bullshit. In fact, her and Martins parted on good terms, with Draper thanking him for all of his help. I suppose in the show, Martins is taking on more of the role that Thorson played in the books, but Draper never attacked Thorson the way she attacks Martins here. In fact, the last scene I mentioned with Thorson telling her to stay on Earth because that's what she's ordered to do was the last time we saw Thorson in the novels. Also in the novels, everyone was already publicly aware that the protomolecule hybrid exists and that they attacked on Ganymede, so no one was denying what Bobby saw. However, they weren't aware that high-up officials in both the Earth and Mars government were currently in a bidding war for this technology. Of course, in the show, there isn't a bidding war as much as a demonstration solely for Mars, who is in the process of taking control of the technology. But Draper didn't find any of this out by attacking Thorson, but eventually learned it through working with Avasarala. But I thought this scene was absolutely amazing and a huge improvement on the books, as it was much more exciting and gratifying seeing Bobby take a huge risk that, as Martins points out, could get her killed. But she's more determined to do the right thing and uncover this conspiracy that killed her team. So I loved it. So I'm going to give this a +5. So then Draper tries to slowly but calmly make her way out of the building without anyone noticing, and she succeeds, but is only just out of the building when the Marines notice something is wrong and they get a call to stop her. And then they chase her down, which we get an awesome chase scene through the courtyard that separates the Martian compound from the UN compound, but she makes a run for it. And as she charges towards UN territory, one soldier threatens to shoot her, but another corrects him, saying that they're not authorized to do so. And once she makes it to UN territory, the Martians stop chasing her, not wanting to violate UN territory. But the UN Marines there threaten to shoot her as she violated their territory, but she waves her hands in the air, stating that she is requesting political asylum on Earth. This scene was absolutely amazing. I remember the first time I watched it, it totally blew me away. It was riveting by the huge chance that Draper took. I mean, she could have been shot. But the books, however, she did no such thing. I mentioned in a previous video about how instead of a secret meeting by the beach, Avasarala simply walked up to Draper in a bar and offered her a job. And after her meeting with Thorson, where he made it clear that he was just going to use her as a showpiece, Draper went in and accepted the job and was officially Avasarala's liaison to Mars. So the Martians were aware of this position and didn't try to stop her, although she mused that probably the Martians thought less of her and mocked her behind her back. But it was as simple as going into an office and taking the job, not the death-defying asylum seeking as it was here. And the show's version, I must say, is so much better. Not only is it more thrilling and suspenseful, but also adds a richer dynamic to Draper's character story, as she had to go through the length of fully being a traitor and attacking her CEO. So again, absolutely loved it. It's one of the high points of the entire show, in my opinion. +5. So then we get Bobby Draper in Avasarala's office, where Kotyar is sizing her up, and the two of them don't seem to be getting along. But then Avasarala comes in and is friendly, but tells her when she said that she needed her help, she didn't mean to cause a diplomatic incident. And Draper simply retorts by saying, then you should have been more specific. Draper then alerts Avasarala of what she found out about the weapon test, and that the peace conference is just stalling to give the Martians time to complete the sale, and that surely the head negotiator Korshunov is also involved in this conspiracy as well. She had apparently given Martin's hand terminal to Kotyar, who tells Avasarala that the team will crack it like an egg. And then Avasarala asks Draper if she'll be up for a debriefing, and she says yes. Now, in the novels, as I said, there was no defection, and everyone was already aware the protomolecular hybrid existed, although Draper said that the Martians are stalling in order to complete the cell because they want it badly, which I think implies that they are the only ones involved, which is also backed up by how Jules Pierre Mao cut off ties with Ehrenreich because he thinks that he's weak, and he went to the Martians and offered them the technology instead, whereas in the novels, both the UN and the Martians are secretly in a bidding war for the technology. Also, the show's version of Kotyar is partially based on Soren. Soren was Avasarala's assistant, who also had a strained relationship with Bobby Draper. But unlike Kotyar, Soren was a traitor who was working for Admiral Wynne and Ehrenreich and spying on Avasarala. And it was actually Draper who found this out and told Avasarala, who promptly fired him. However, I think I do much prefer the show's version, as Kotyar is such an interesting character, and the whole defection storyline was just amazing, so I'm going to give this a +2. So we go back to Ganymede, where Holden, Naomi, Amos, and Prax arrive at the compound that appears to be active, and they prepare to storm it. Prax asks Amos for a gun, and so he gives him one and tells him how to use it. They then storm in to find a group of scientists and soldiers sitting at a table eating a meal. The leader appears to be the same woman in the flashbacks with Dr. Strickland when they first took May. She offers Holden and the others pizza, but Holden simply tells Amos to disarm them, but the woman retorts that that's not going to happen. She then suggests that Holden and the others put their guns down and they talk in order to find a non-violent way out of the situation. But before Holden can react, Prax sees May's backpack and freaks out. He steps forward, waving his gun around, demanding to know where May is, and the soldiers react to this aggressive move by drawing their own weapons, and a firefight breaks out. Several soldiers and scientists are taken down, while several others, including the leader, got away. Amos has to tackle Prax to the ground to protect him, but Amos gets shot in the shoulder in the process, while Naomi tends to his wound. Now, in the novels, Amos has already given Prax a gun before the mission even started, in full sight of Holden, who was against this, and there was a whole sequence leading up to this fight with Holden staging Pinkwater mercenaries at key positions as lookouts in the corridors on their way. Once they got to the compound, they at first thought it was abandoned, but then noticed there was more heat coming from a specific door, so Holden started to come up with a strategy of attack, and while he was telling Amos and the Pinkwater mercenaries about how the strategy was going to go down, Prax simply slipped by them and charged into the room by himself, waving his gun around and telling everyone not to move. Holden and the others came in after him to back him up. However, the scientists and soldiers weren't at a dinner table. Instead, they were packing crates preparing to leave, but they were having a meal break as they had stopped to eat pizza and were doing so when Prax burst in. Likewise, Holden tells Amos to disarm them, and the leader said it wasn't going to happen. It's unclear that the woman here was the same one who helped Dr. Strickland take May, but I suppose it's possible. But she doesn't offer up talk in a non-violent solution, but instead just continues to eat pizza like nothing's wrong. But before Holden can come up with something, Prax steps forward demanding to know where May was, and he cocked his gun, which is what set everyone off to draw their weapons, and it started a firefight. However, unlike the show where Prax was angry and set off by seeing May's backpack, he was simply ignorant and cocked his gun just to demonstrate how serious he was, because that's what he saw in movies, not realizing that in real life this would start a firefight. In fact, the firefight was over within seconds before Prax even realized what happened. Amos never tackled him to the ground, he just luckily survived. Amos wasn't shot, but a Pinkwater mercenary was shot and injured, and 2 other mercenaries, I believe, were killed. And all the enemy scientists and soldiers were killed. However, before she died, the woman implied that there were more soldiers in a nearby room. I think I like both versions equally. In both versions, the Protogen, for lack of a better term, agents were arrogant and stubborn, which goes with their character. And in one version, Prax let his anger get the better of him, and the other, he's just incompetent. Either way works for me, so I'm going to give this a 0. So then we go back to Earth, where Avasarala is playing Cotillard a message she received from Jules Pierre Mao, where he offers for them to meet him in person to discuss the current situation and come to an agreement. He states he can no longer do business while she continues to take down all of his business partners. So he suggests a truce, but states that she needs her to stop her financial attacks on his family immediately. After seeing the message, Cotillard says that it's a trap, but Avasarala feels that it might be her best opportunity to stop Jules Pierre Mao, so reveals that she has already accepted his offer of a meeting. Now, in the novels, Jules Pierre Mao has not been publicly called out as being involved in the Eros incident. In fact, he was vindicated of any involvement or any blame for the incident, placing the blame entirely on the now disbanded Protogen. So Mao was still in good standing with the government, and in fact offered to help in the relief effort of Ganymede, and Ehrenreich ordered Avasarala to go on a peace mission to Ganymede, to which Jules Pierre Mount offered up his personal yacht for her to travel in order to get there. Although by this stage Avasarala realized that Ehrenreich was working with Jules Pierre Mount, and he has realized that she realized, and is basically sending her to Ganymede to get her out of play. But she goes along with it in order to play this political game, because if she refused, it weakens her political position, despite the fact that she is well aware that Ehrenreich is simply trying to control her and take her off the board. So quite a different situation, but I think both work for their respective mediums, so I'm going to give this a 0. So we then go back to Ganymede, where Prax enters a side room where he finds a chamber with the body of a dead child. The scene is intercut with flashbacks of Strickland taking May into a laboratory and hooking her up to a machine, while several children are already hooked up to, while she asks to see her daddy. Prax then uncovers the body to find a half-mangled protomolecule-covered corpse. Holden and Naomi come in and warn Prax not to touch it. Prax then realizes that it's not May and doesn't know who it is. They then leave the room. Holden has the body incinerated to erase all traces of the protomolecule. So in the novels, Holden and Prax actually come across the dead body before they have the gunfight with the goons. The body isn't protomolecule covered, as at this stage Holden is still unaware that the protomolecule is involved. And Prax does in fact know who the child is. It's Katoa, who is the son of Bajia, who we have seen both in the books and the show earlier. Although the show is saving Katoa for a season 3 storyline. They don't incinerate the body because at this stage Holden isn't aware that there'd be a reason to. Instead, Prax freaks out after seeing Katoa's dead body, thinking that it means May is dead as well, and Holden has to repeatedly tell him that that isn't May in order to get him to calm down. I like both scenes, but I think I'll give the slight edge to the show here, as it had a more ominous feel to it, and the intercutting scenes with Strickland's hooking May up to the experiment was a really nice touch, and so I'm going to give this a +1. So someone then opens the door and tosses a grenade in, but luckily Amos was standing by the door, so he catches the grenade and just throws it right back out and shuts the door. The grenade goes off, and Holden and the others can hear strange sounds such as alarms and a firefight breaking out on the other side, and the weird sounds of a creature. The indication being, of course, that the grenade unleashed a protomolecule hybrid who then started attacking the soldiers on the other side. In the novels, a very similar thing happens, although Amos and the Pinkwater mercenaries were already engaged in a firefight with them when they throw in the grenade, but the same thing happens where Amos throws a grenade back out, and Prax hears what to him sounded like an animal attacking the soldiers on the other side. But I just love seeing this on screen, the way everything was done through sound effects, and seeing the reaction to Holden and Amos's face as they listened to this carnage. It was just so well done, so I'm going to give this a +2. We then cut over to Venus, where the Abergast had lowered its descent to come closer to the Eros crash site, and they launch another probe, and this one is successful and lands near the crash site. It brings back some images of these weird structures being built at the Eros crash site, but they quickly lose the communication with the probe after a few seconds. Now, in the novels, not as much time is spent on the storyline, although it is suggested that the Abergast had discovered images of strange structures on Venus, but that's about it. I do think it adds more to actually get characters at this location, so I'm going to give this a +1. We then go back to Ganymede, where Holden and the others enter the hangar where the carnage took place to find dead bodies everywhere and a container that seems to be busted out of, and Amos surmises that something broke out of it and killed everyone. And then they see the outer airlock has been ripped open, so whatever it was ripped through the airlock. They then hear a noise, and it's coming from the lead scientist, who's barely alive as she's dying. She asks for help, but Holden says that she messed with the protomolecule and left a child to die, so why would he help her? And he demands to know what they're doing, and she said that they shaped the protomolecule in their own image, of course suggesting the protomolecule hybrids. And she then ominously states that there's a lot more where that came from, and then she promptly dies. Now, in the novels, they also surveyed the carnage left by the protomolecule hybrid, but there were still some thugs in nearby rooms who were still firing at them and still fighting. The rest of the Pinkwater mercenaries left behind guarding the corridors came back to rejoin the team. There was no one left half alive in the room, however, as the lead scientist had died in the gunfight. So no convenient dying last words to push the plot forward. But when they were investigated the airlock, they found traces of the protomolecule, and this is when Holden first discovers the protomolecule is involved, and he freaks out. He yells at Naomi to contact Alex right away, saying that they need to leave right now. They don't quite know about the hybrids, and he assumes that it's another infection similar to the one on Eros, and that's it's going to infect Ganymede. And it's obvious that the trauma that he experienced on Eros is affecting his judgment here, as one of the Pinkwater mercenaries was severely injured, and while Wendell and Amos try to care for him, Holden orders that they leave him behind to die so that they can leave immediately. But Amos refuses to do it, saying that they won't leave a man behind, so Holden formulates a plan to get out of there and to make it back to the Somnambulist. So it's hard to say which one I like better, as the story dynamics are so different in both cases. While I like Holden's irrational PTSD reaction in the novels, the show actually spreads this out over a longer period of time because he already knew coming in that the protomolecule is involved. In fact, I do like how this has turned him into a cold-blooded guy, as he outright refused to help a dying woman and told her to her face. That was harsh. So I'm going to give this a +1. So Alex then shows up at the airlock and freaks everyone out. He then explains that the Martians enacted a no-fly zone, but they suspended it for one Black Ops ship, so he assumed they were coming for the protomolecule, so figured that he might find Holden and the others there. Holden tells Alex to get the Roci ready in order to eliminate all traces of the protomolecule, but Naomi says that she's not going with him, and that they don't know how widespread the protomolecule is, and that it may be impossible to eliminate all traces of it, while there are people on Ganymede who need their help, so she's going back to the Somnambulist to help Melissa get as many people off of Ganymede as she can, and Holden tells Amos to go with her, who agrees. He also tells Prax to go with her, but he refuses, saying that he's staying with Holden. After Naomi and Amos leave, they look out the airlock to see the protomolecule hybrid in the distance looking at them. Holden then tells everyone to suit up as they're going on a hunt. Now, the novels were very different here, and there was a much longer sequence that goes into these events. Avasarala had been monitoring Holden the whole time he was on Ganymede with a group of spies, and when the attacking with the protomolecule hybrid and the scientists broke out, she ordered the team to abduct Holden and his crew and take them into UN custody. So at this stage, Holden's plan was to have Alex take the Roci to the same airlock the Somnambulist was parked at, and give the Somnambulist to Wendell and the Pinkwater mercenaries while the rest of them left on the Rocinante. But while they were on their way back to the airlock, he lost communications with Naomi, and when they arrived at the airlock, they were attacked by Avasarala's strike team. Not knowing who they were, Holden fought to the death to try to get away from the protomolecule, but the strike team prevailed and managed to subdue all of them, not killing them, but knocking them all out. And I'll cover what happens from here in the following episode, as that deals with more of how they got off of Ganymede. But for this, I'm going to have to say I prefer the book's version of events here, as I don't really buy how Naomi would just go off on her own and how she's upset with Jim. I mean, I guess it works for her character, but I just like it better in the novels where they're actually sticking together. So I'm going to give this a -2. So my final adaptation score for Here There Be Dragons is a plus 29. A very high score indeed. From recollection, I think this is one of the highest scores I've ever given an episode, and I do consider this to be one of the better episodes of the show. The Bobby Draper stuff especially was a huge improvement on the novels and took the story in a much more exciting and suspenseful direction than the books did. And the Holden Pratt storyline, while perhaps not a vast improvement from the novels, was still just as exciting as it was in the novels, and it did that storyline justice, and it was just more exciting to be able to see and hear those events play out in the visual medium. So a very excellent adaptation. So that's it for my book-to-show comparison for The Expanse Season 2, Episode 11. I'll be back in about a month for my book-to-show comparison for Season 2, Episode 12. In the meantime, you can check out my channel for many more videos on The Expanse, as well as I cover other shows like Star Trek, Game of Thrones, Lost, Discovery, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.